Good day to all thinking people. You're on the Open Space YouTube channel. Today we have another episode of Rational Melancholy, that state when everything seems clear, but it doesn't make life any easier, and the depth of melancholy is measured by the degree of fatigue from the world around us. Today, we'll talk about something that looks like technological magic but behaves like a political bomb. Artificial intelligence is no longer about make me a funny text or find a cat from a photo. It's increasingly becoming part of security solutions. What we see, how quickly we react, and how convincingly we can demonstrate our readiness to act. And here's the paradox. The more artificial intelligence accelerates analysis and sharpens the picture, the easier it is to change that picture. Deterrence, after all, rests not on slogans, but on two things: the ability to strike back and the willingness to do so. And if the enemy learns to quietly manipulate our data and our confidence, even a strong position begins to look dubious. So we'll explore how artificial intelligence simultaneously enhances military power and undermines trust in it, and why sometimes it's not enough to defeat you on the battlefield, but simply to make you second-guess yourself. Did we even understand what's going on? Let's go. Artificial intelligence is increasingly moving beyond being something to play with on weekends and becoming a tool for national security decisions. Armed forces around the world are already using models to analyze satellite imagery, assess adversaries' capabilities, and make recommendations on when, where, and how to use force. And the better these systems are, the more they change the way states respond to threats. The problem is that with this strength comes new vulnerabilities. We usually talk about deterrence as if it were an ironclad formula, like, don't interfere or you'll get it. But in reality, deterrence relies on the adversary's belief in two things: that a country is capable of inflicting unacceptable damage, and that it's truly willing to do so if tested. Capabilities are somewhat manageable. Some strength is visible, some can be assessed indirectly, but many parameters are difficult to discern from the outside. Specific types of weapons, combat readiness, mobilization capabilities, and resolve is almost always murky. Often only the leaders themselves know their true risk limits. A simple logic follows from this. Deterrence is not only about force, but also about communication. Both capabilities and readiness must be convincingly demonstrated, and this must be demonstrated in a way that doesn't look like a cheap bluff that can be called off at any moment. That's why expensive signals are especially valuable in the game. Troop redeployment, increased combat readiness, anything that requires time, resources, and political risk. Such signals are difficult to counterfeit because they actually cost money and effort. Following the 2001 attack on the Indian parliament by a Pakistani militant group, India massed troops along the border with Pakistan. This appeared to be a demonstration of its ability and resolve to act. And it was precisely this credibility that helped prevent further attacks on Indian soil. Democracies have a distinct mechanism for persuasion, and frankly, it's quite ruthless: internal political pressure. The leader of a democratic country is accountable to the citizens, and threats followed by refusal can result in a political backlash, meaning a real price for the government. In 1982, following Argentina's seizure of the Falkland Islands, intense public pressure in the United Kingdom strengthened the government's resolve to act. For outside observers, this also signaled that if a response is demanded at home, it's harder to refuse. Ultimately, the threat of a military response appears more compelling than in a system where a leader can simply change his mind without consequences. There's also speed. Deterrence is stronger when it's clear a country can act quickly and almost automatically, because an aggressor likes to exploit delays. While you're discussing, they've managed to seize territory or gain a foothold. At first glance, artificial intelligence seems ideally suited to enhance all of this. It processes massive amounts of data, speeds up assessments, and makes decisions more consistent. Better intelligence and faster analysis can more clearly demonstrate to the adversary that you have capabilities and that you can, in principle, exploit them. During the Russian-Ukrainian war, AI tools helped Ukrainian troops quickly review satellite and drone imagery. identifying Russian troop and equipment movements, missile positions, and supply routes. They extracted and aggregated data from radar, audio, and radio signals. They also accelerated the analysis of training manuals, intelligence reports, and other materials to gather a more complete picture. For planners, this isn't just about fancy analytics. It reduces the share of "we feel this way" and increases the share of comparable assessments. What's going on here? What's going on there? Where's the risk window? It also helps formulate responses faster before the enemy has a chance to get ahead. Artificial intelligence can also enhance deterrence through signaling. States have an incentive to bluff, making it difficult for the other side to understand the credibility of threats and the seriousness of actions. AI tools, however, can identify costly moves and communicate them quickly, clearly, and consistently to all parties. If the adversary has its own AI systems, they too can interpret such signals, reducing the risk of misperception. An interesting point concerns the domestic politics of democracies. If artificial intelligence monitors public opinion in real time, the state can demonstrate that a threat relies on political support, and the adversary, theoretically, can verify the authenticity of this support using its own tools. In other words, artificial intelligence seemingly makes domestic factors more observable from the outside. Add to this the search for patterns and anomalies. Humans are good at thinking, but they're poor at constantly monitoring everything. Artificial intelligence can detect sudden changes in troop movements, financial flows, or cyber activity. Such anomalies can reveal intentions and give leaders a clearer picture of what the enemy is up to. And finally, scenarios. By running multiple what-if scenarios based on data on power, geography, supply lines, and alliances, AI can help maintain a coherent strategy in a protracted crisis. This is important because crises rarely follow a straight line, and deterrence breaks down precisely in chaos and upheaval. And here's where the paradox begins. The same technologies that should make the situation clearer and faster can make deterrence vulnerable to abuse. If manipulated, they can sow uncertainty in leaders' abilities and resolve, and at the moment when a firm signal is needed, doubt and pause appear, and in such games, pause is sometimes worth more than tanks. There are two basic tactics an adversary can use to undermine another's information environment. The first is influence operations using artificial intelligence. The second is poisoning the AI models that leaders and agencies rely on. What's important here is that both tactics don't operate as a single, debunkable fake. They attack the process, how decisions are made, and what is trusted in general. When doubt is built into the system, the leader can spend time trying to understand which data is real rather than choosing actions, and that's precisely the kind of freeze frame the adversary is waiting for. Influence operations have always existed, but generative artificial intelligence has dramatically improved them in three interconnected areas: who to target, how to create believable personas, and how to generate content tailored to specific individuals. Previously, it was possible to group people into clusters based on common characteristics. Now it's possible to automate influencing individuals on a mass scale, and it's becoming a conveyor belt. Artificial intelligence can predict how receptive a specific target is to certain narratives or fake social media profiles. Importantly, bots no longer have to look like robots. Generative models create synthetic personas that appear believable and aren't immediately catchable. They can evolve over time, mimicking real-world posting habits, interests, and language. When such accounts begin spreading synthetic content, the goal isn't always to prove a single big lie. Often it's enough to create a heated and divisive public debate. Then the false information begins to seem true or at least plausible, and most importantly, confidence vanishes. For example, to weaken public resolve in the United States, such images can fuel narratives about an overstretched military, allies getting free rides on security, or the notion that certain international issues aren't worth fighting for. This, taken together and across multiple platforms, can undermine consensus and send a message to leaders. Support is scarce and the risks are high, and if leaders aren't confident of support at home, their resolve becomes less credible externally. If this method is scaled up, it will result in personalized content delivered to the entire population in real time. This is cognitive warfare, and it undermines democratic advantage. Internal pressure, which usually makes threats more significant, can be diluted and replaced. There's also a more targeted approach, influencing those who shape national debates, including decision-makers. The example of the Chinese company Galaxy is important here. It uses generative artificial intelligence and large, open datasets to create detailed psychological profiles and deploy synthetic networks that mimic real users. The approach works like this: collect information about influencers, then use it to craft messages designed to persuade the target audience, and then distribute these messages from carefully crafted social media scenes. Importantly, such activity has a state structure. Galaxy is linked to Chinese state priorities and to state-owned research institutes, as well as to companies producing superconductors. Ultimately, it appears to be a sophisticated propaganda tool that can be deployed for specific purposes. An analysis of documents from Vanderbilt University's National Security Institute reveals that Galaxy has already conducted operations in Hong Kong and Taiwan, and is collecting dossiers on members of the U.S. Congress and public figures around the world. Open sources make it possible to gather profiles of politicians, military leaders, and soldiers, which can then be used in targeted operations. At the tactical level, adversaries can use deepfake messages to show soldiers false combat conditions or false circumstances at home. If accurate personal details are added, the fabrication becomes realistic enough to distract or disrupt unit cohesion. In politics, real photos can be mixed with cloned voices and faces, and even if such a thing never makes it into the public eye, the mere threat of exposure can weaken rhetoric, delay legislative processes, or weaken the resolve of leaders. Another dangerous trick is faking false ceasefire orders or rerouting commands to alternative communication channels. This creates a cognitive fog of war. It seems like a signal has arrived, but you're not sure who it's from or whether you can trust it. The second tactic is model poisoning, or the strategic manipulation of the artificial intelligence systems that governments rely on for intelligence and decision support. Essentially, this is an attempt to distort the very lens through which a leader views a situation. This alters their understanding of their relative strength and the urgency of the threat. The danger is that an incorrect assessment leads either to unfounded confidence or to hesitation. A system that underestimates the adversary's capabilities encourages complacency. A system that exaggerates the threat makes the leader more cautious than necessary and buys the adversary time. In both cases, deterrent signals appear less reliable. The poisoning mechanism is quite specific. The data processing pipeline is manipulated so that the model ignores important information and absorbs false inputs. One method is to inject false information into the datasets the system processes for training. This information may appear harmless to humans, but it biases the model's reasoning, for example, by causing it to label certain types of malware as safe, allowing the attacker to bypass the AI-controlled firewall. While there are no direct documented cases of this approach, research demonstrates the vulnerability of existing datasets. Another option is via the Internet. If an AI system constantly searches for new information online in real time, an adversary can create corrupted web pages that inject hidden instructions and distort the model's assessment. If the filters are weak, even a small number of such pages can lead to inaccurate responses. If this sounds like a TV series plot, here's the problem. In a high-stakes crisis, such tricks are enough to disrupt the decision-making rhythm, and you don't even have to deceive for long. Just throw the system into a state of doubt for a couple of days, and the window of opportunity opens. Consider a scenario involving Taiwan. China imposes sweeping economic sanctions and conducts major military exercises around the island. American officials turn to AI-powered systems to formulate a response, unaware that Chinese information operations may have poisoned the training data and key input parameters beforehand. As a result, The models overestimate China's actual capabilities and underestimate U.S. preparedness. The resulting assessment is skewed, hindering mobilization. At the same time, influence campaigns fueled by streams of AI-generated fake content on platforms like Facebook and TikTok are suppressing support for intervention among the American public. Leaders are caught between distorted data and distorted sentiment, and decisive action begins to seem too risky. The logic then continues to evolve. China, seizing an opportunity, imposes a complete blockade on Taiwan and launches drone strikes. It floods the island with deepfakes depicting American officials seemingly ready to concede, adding fabricated polls and rumors of betrayal. Meanwhile, credible signals of readiness to respond, which could have deterred escalation, are not used because its own systems and public signals appear unreliable. And here we have a major twist. Artificial intelligence was supposed to strengthen deterrence by making signals to adversaries clearer. But if an adversary can weaponize AI, it can do the opposite, undermine trust and open the door to aggression. This leads to the conclusions regarding defense. For deterrence to work in the age of artificial intelligence, policymakers, military planners, and intelligence agencies must recognize that models can be attacked and that influence operations can be scaled to the personal level. Therefore, digital defenses and verification procedures must be responsive to these threats, otherwise they simply won't keep up. The logic behind the response is quite straightforward. Strengthen analytical systems against model distortion and actively counter influence operations when they are detected. To combat activities like Galaxy, the U.S. and its remaining allies will need to learn how to quickly identify and disrupt synthetic networks, finding and neutralizing AI-generated images before they take hold. Educational campaigns about synthetic media and how to recognize them will also be needed to ensure that society is not completely defenseless. The demand for cooperation immediately arises. Democratic governments, social media and artificial intelligence platforms, and interdisciplinary researchers must work together, because part of the problem lies in the algorithms, part in moderation, and part in policy, and this construct cannot be solved individually. At the strategic level, we need to prioritize technologies that quickly detect synthetic messages. Governments, academia, and the private sector must develop decision-making protection mechanisms and data filtering systems resilient to distorted inputs, and work with allies to do so to identify and punish the perpetrators of large-scale campaigns. Another key element is programmatically testing new models for flaws, including hidden data distortion, and doing so with strict transparency to enable expert review. Robust protection mechanisms and rigorous testing are especially needed during moments of extreme stress or crisis. Ultimately, deterrence in the age of artificial intelligence can no longer be reduced solely to capabilities and resolve. It begins to require the ability to maintain the reliability of the information environment, even when surrounded by digital distortions. And the question that remains uncomfortably open is quite simple. Will the state be able to maintain this environment sufficiently clean in times of crisis? Because if it can't, even a strong force can appear weak, simply because someone has timely tampered with its worldview. Give the podcast a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you found it interesting and want more podcasts like this one that explore the global chaos around us through the lens of rationalism, and be sure to leave a comment if you have any questions or just something to say. Peace to all.